Welcome to Day 28 on the Trail. We have four readings for today from Luke 14, verses 25 through 35, Genesis 46, verses 1 through 27, the 39th and 40th Psalms, and Sirach chapter 35, verses 1 through 13. We begin today in Psalm 40. In the first three verses, we find, I waited patiently for the Lord. He inclined to me and heard my cry. He drew me up from the desolate pit, out of the miry bog, and set my feet on a rock, making my steps secure. He put a new song in my mouth, a song of praise to our God. Many will see and fear and put their trust in the Lord. Several years ago, the band U2 used these verses for their song entitled 40. However, they added their own chorus, which said, How long must we sing this song? It seems they were asking, when will this happen? How long do I have to wait? Unfortunately, I believe they missed the point of this psalm. Verse 1 clearly states, I waited patiently for the Lord. And then what happened? The Lord responded. The Lord inclined to hear the psalmist's cry. Now, I understand that we get impatient. We want God to act now, to bring about change. But the entire point of the psalm is centered around patience. In fact, in 1 Corinthians 13, Paul provides a definition of love. And what is the first descriptor that Paul uses for his definition? He says, love is patient. Being patient is not always easy, but patience demonstrates our faith and trust in God. And as Paul points out, patience is where love begins. Turning to Luke 14, we find one of the harder sayings of Jesus. In verses 25 through 27, it reads, Now large crowds were traveling with him, and he turned and said to them, Whoever comes to me and does not hate father and mother, wife and children, brothers and sisters, yes, and even life itself, cannot be my disciple. Whoever does not carry the cross and follow me cannot be my disciple. These words can be difficult to hear. Does Jesus really mean what he is saying here? Now, first, I want to point out that these hard sayings of Jesus were not ignored or set aside by the earliest Christians. Instead, they kept them and passed them along to us, even despite their difficulty. So, what is Jesus trying to teach us here? Let me approach this from a slightly different direction. One of my favorite quotes is from an author named Annie Dillard in her article, Expedition to the Pole. In this article, Dillard is discussing the Christian life, or more specifically, Christian worship. Here she writes, On the whole, I do not find Christians outside of the catacombs. Now, to be clear, the catacombs are where Christians were often buried during times of persecution. So, on the whole, I do not find Christians outside of the catacombs sufficiently sensible of the conditions. Does anyone have the foggiest idea what sort of power we so blithely invoke? It is madness to wear ladies' straw hats and velvet hats to church. We should all be wearing crash helmets. Ushers should issue life preservers and signal flares. They should lash us to our pews, for the waking God may draw us out, from which we can never return. She talks about the seriousness of approaching God. And likewise, in our passage from Luke's Gospel today, Jesus is talking about the seriousness of following Him, our journey of discipleship. There is a vast difference between being attracted to Jesus and being attached to Jesus, taking His words and His call to discipleship seriously. During Jesus' 3-year ministry, there were many who started out following Him, but at some point, they decided to leave. In John chapter 6, beginning in verse 66, we find, Because of this, many of his disciples turned back and no longer went about with him. So Jesus asked the 12, "Do you also wish to go away?" Simon Peter answered him, "Lord, to whom can we go? You have the words of eternal life." Jesus has called us to follow him, and not at a comfortable distance. However, does this mean that we should actually hate our family, hate our lives? Of course not. For example, in Paul's letter to the church in Ephesus, he writes, "Husbands, love your wives, just as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her." Then Paul also writes to Timothy, "Whoever does not provide for relatives, and especially for family members, has denied the faith and is worse than an unbeliever." So in Luke 14, Jesus is focusing on our priorities, our ultimate allegiance. Do we truly put him first? Because if we put our relationship with him first in our lives, our families benefit. Our life is given true, lasting meaning. And those around us, our friends, neighbors, and coworkers, benefit from our commitment to following the way of Jesus. In Matthew chapter 10, we find a similar statement from Jesus, which may be helpful here. Jesus says, "Whoever loves father or mother more than me is not worthy of me. And whoever loves son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me. And whoever does not take up the cross and follow me is not worthy of me. Those who find their life will lose it, and those who lose their life for my sake will find it." Following Jesus is not about what we lose, but what we will find. We will find life, true life, not just for ourselves, but for our family, our neighbors, and the world around us. Thank you for joining us today. Until next time, stay on the trail.